don't just assume that your water's good. Make sure that you're checking it, because this was an operation where we were going farm to farm and they were just showing me how good everything was, and we got to this barn and he tested it and there was nothing in there. And so he's on the phone with that farm manager. He's like, oh yeah, well, the medicator went out and blah, blah, blah. And I tell you, there's some places they can't have their sanitizer off for 24 hours that problems start showing up. So stay on top of it. Know that what you think's there is really there. Chlorine dioxide. This is another option that's given some folks some relief from things that aren't responding to chlorine anymore. There's a couple of them that I've worked with, so I'll just kind of share those stories. It doesn't necessarily make them the best, but I'm just going to share my story to let you know what it takes to make sure they work well. We've worked with like the DuPont anthium dioxide. And what you got to remember, if you have a jug of what some sales guy's telling you is chlorine dioxide, that's really sodium chloride. And it needs to be activated with an acid in order to have chlorine dioxide. That's the strong sanitizer, the chlorine dioxide. And that's also the one that doesn't mind if the pH goes up to 10. So you got a lot more freedom with the pH in your water with the chlorine dioxides. In this case, what these guys, the DuPont Neogen guys, have done is they've kind of made the injector tea, and so you inject your sodium chloride, your acid, it blends, it makes chlorine dioxide, and then the little check valve allows it to go into, into the water, so your tea injector. So that's one option for you. We've done some work with Pro-Oxine. This is another sodium chloride product, and you activate it with the acid. And they figured out a way, say you only got one injector, say you've got one Stenner pump, well then you can pour the two into your container here. That'll make the chlorine dioxide, and then it injects in. And we've been working with a turkey operation that was struggling with Bordetella. Their chlorine just wasn't working for them on this operation, so we got them to let us set up the Pro-Oxine there. First flop, they did not have Bordetella. So we've started the second flop. We're going to see how it works. But what I've been intrigued by is when we went out kind of right after we were getting everything set up and they've cleaned the lines and it's a finished barn and they've moved the birds in, we did some swabbing and some drip samples. Well, look how much stuff was coming out, what we found on the swab in the line, and how much was colony-forming units of bacteria coming out the end of the line, and this was starting out. But over a 6-week grow-out period with our Pro-Oxine steady going, we came back at the end, and it really kind of helped knock down the biofilm, and we weren't seeing anything in the water. So that's going to be kind of tied back to, all right, if the water system's the source of health challenges, let's get something in there that's going to be more effective. And we've got, some other work with chlorine, and just kind of on this take-home message, that week 1, comparing bleach to chlorine dioxide, you can see the counts are kind of high, and those are log values, and you just, whatever that numbers is, you just add that many zeros behind it. But take-home message, if you're not moving the water, then the sanitizer isn't a miracle worker, unless possibly it's one of the stabilized hydrogen peroxides. But by week 2, once the birds were moving that water themselves, now all of a sudden we were getting more benefits with the chlorine dioxide versus the bleach. That was a bleach acid injection with a decent ORP. So, and then as that flock went along and they were really moving the water late, like week 5 or so, we started kind of see them getting close to the same levels of bacteria. But kind of this just told us, maybe, and these were 2 houses of each being compared, hey, maybe we have worn out bleach. Maybe we do need to be looking at some alternatives, or maybe rotating them in, kind of like we switch our Coxie control up to not let things get too comfortable in our systems. Again, monitor. Don't assume it's right. Get a good kit to monitor. The hot kits are great. Hydrogen peroxide, you can use the test strips, but I can't encourage you enough. Don't tell me what you're doing. Show me what you're doing. Because if you show me, chances are you're probably going to have a whole lot more success with it. Or you're also going to know, hey, bleach is not working anymore. We got to do something else. Here's a new water sanitation technology that we've kind of started looking at. It's called the Silver Bullet, and it uses ultraviolet light and air compressor and electricity to kind of make these advanced oxidation process. And it's sort of hocus pocus at this point, but all right, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, because it's really kind of tricky, because there's really not any residual. There may be just a little hint of hydrogen peroxide. It's like, what do you measure? So right now, where they're using this, we're looking at bacteria counts. And at first, I'm very skeptical. This is, there's kind of some black box, hocus pocus stuff going on here. But for some folks, where we're having benefits with it, is if you can diffuse it into a wellhead or into a holding tank of water, and it just continuously runs. And you can't over sanitize the water, because it just breaks down to air and oxygen and water. So where I've seen these recirculation tanks with chlorine and you over sanitize the water, you don't see that with this. So I'm kind of excited about it, because some of these places where they go down, they're cleaning, that water's in this tank or the well, it's just sitting there. We can continuously sanitize it and kind of preserve the quality. So it's got some potential. There's several breeder folks in our area that have started putting them in, and they're kind of excited about them, but we'll see. So kind of at this time, I'm cautiously optimistic about the Silver Bullet. We'll see, if it's the best way, really to sanitize our water. So it's a thought. And again, if you can diffuse straight into the well aquifer, or into a large holding tank, that is definitely the way to go. Kind of an inline system doesn't seem to be as effective.